Hello there, Unlearners. Welcome back to another episode of the Unlearners podcast with myself, Zanele Njapa, the Unlearning Lady. It is an honor, once again, to have you taking the time to engage in this conversation that is going to be, for me, a really exciting one as someone who does have a history within education, specifically those early years of a child's schooling, to be able to challenge some of the perceptions that we have around where we take our schools. And whether if we choose to have alternative schooling for our children, is that really the best way to do it? Because as much as we have all these different opinions from our circles of parents that gather, or maybe we're just having conversations as someone who's looking into bringing our children into schooling, it's a critical conversation to have.
The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow. Learn, change, grow. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow.
And we've got none other than Marc Loon, who is, and Marc, I think we're going to have such a juicy discussion with you today because you are literally completely broken the mold and you have built something. And when I looked up a little bit more about Kairos schools, I saw that you have this title of being schools of inquiry. And that for me was mind-blowing. I'd like you to maybe even start with that. Firstly, welcome to the Unlearners podcast. See, I get so excited.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe let's start there. Where does, and I know the meaning around the word Kairos, but maybe you can touch a little bit on that, but why the school of inquiry?
So just by the way, we're only one school.
Uh-huh.
There's no schools. In fact, there's worth a discussion that if many people have asked me, can we start a Kairos school in Durban or in some other place? And that is worth a discussion because we've grown the school ourselves from the ground up, and I really believe that's important to grow the school from the people who are in situ. So, tell me the question again.
So the word, is there a reason
Kairos.
why you've chosen to go with that word? What's the link there between what you do and the meaning of the word Kairos?
So the word is an ancient Greek word, and it means time. I think my dad introduced me to the word as a child, and I came across the word in different contexts in kind of adult workshops. The word is time, and the word chronos is also a different ancient Greek word for time.
Yeah.
We get accused for being a Greek school. We're not a Greek school.
Oops.
But we're a school that tries to really take care of the Kairos relationship with time rather than the Chronos relationship with time. Mm-hmm. Chronos is the fixed timetable, and in a sense, the typical conventional school tends to be enslaved by the Chronos time. Meaning there's a timetable that tells you that this is where I have to be, and there's no flexibility, if there's something really wonderful happening, that's not appropriate right now because the timetable says I'm doing maths and I'm studying algebra in my lesson plan. Therefore, this other thing that's happened is not relevant to the conversation between teacher and children. And we really find it's vital to respect what's alive in the moment, in the conversation between the people in the room, meaning teacher and children. An example comes to mind. In many years ago, I was teaching a painting class, and painting can be really stressful for a teacher because there's a lot, and especially liquid paint, and the young children are very prone to mess and drop and spill. And when this is a school prior to Kairos school, I was teaching in a different school. And at some point, all the children were running around and someone bumped someone else and a glass, I saw this in slow motion and all of us kind of said, ah! And this glass of water flew through the ground, flew through the air and landed upside down on the carpet.
Yeah.
And everyone stopped because there was going to be a total massive mess. And we all froze and we saw that the water was upside down, but all the water in this jar was still in the jar.
Yeah.
And it was the most incredible thing that we didn't make a mess, but it was upside down. So we had two things. We had a science lesson, because how can the water be still in the jar and not falling out? And secondly, it's sort of like an engineering lesson. What are we going to do to solve the problem that there's this water we have to get out? So that's a very Kairos kind of moment. We still had the painting, and it was happening, and the painting, I think, did happen. My memory is we did carry on with the painting, but there were 10 minutes
right there
where we had a big discussion. Everyone came around, and we tried to solve these questions about this water. So that's a Kairos relationship with time, which is for me so important, and all of us in Kairos, that we try and really take care of that. If a child brings an amazing, beautiful question, sometimes that's actually more important than the lesson plan.
Fantastic. And the interpretation I've heard of Kairos, Mark, very similar to yours, is the opportune time. It's the right time. It's the perfect time. And as you were sharing the paints, I think that's going to stick with me. That's the power of stories, hey? That story of the paint and the glass jar of water is going to stick with me, because it is about the shift in our approach to learning. Is that learning doesn't just happen in isolated silos or slots of time, or now we're doing this, now it's technology, now it's that. But it's a consistent, almost meddled up, ongoing, all the time, anytime there is an opportunity to leverage whatever it is that could be learned in that moment. So do you find, and maybe if we think about what you do you find that that's the approach that you're taking at the schools?
Yeah, School. So there's a few things that comes up there, because yes, learning is happening all the time. Even when the teacher is not intending to teach something, there's a hidden curriculum that is inevitable.
Yeah.
And it's in fact deeper. The children are learning, especially the young children. You think you're teaching painting or algebra or history. We were doing Sumeria this morning. And the teacher has this content in the adult brain. There's an intellectual intention to teach something. But there's all other layers that are also being taught. And so the ethos in the room, in the atmosphere of the relationship, the atmosphere of the conversation, the atmosphere from child to child, and in the whole context of this classroom and the school and the country, and for that matter, the children's families, all of that is education, and all of that is being learned. And sometimes there's unwanted messages. So to bring it into the practical terms, when a school introduces a system of a regular test, let's say they do these Friday quizzes on Friday mornings or something, those tests are so deep in the system that they are teaching something more powerful and more memorable to the child than the content of the test. For instance, there's only one right answer. That right answer is only known by the teacher. There's a game going on that the child is trying to work out what is the teacher thinking about. The idea that success is 8 out of 10 for this assessment. Even the idea that someone else can measure and judge my learning and give it a score and compare my score to another child's score, and the child learns that the most important thing is the score. There's all sorts of unwanted learning going on, instead of learning the meaning of how did the person invent, turn the wheel. At some point the wheel became a transport tool. It stopped becoming a potter's tool and a food grinding tool. It used to be something else, and it suddenly became a transport tool. That's fascinating. But if a child's aiming at the 8 out of 10A, first of all, they don't even try their best because they could get 10 out of 10. That's another thing. There's so many unwanted issues about this test. And they're learning that, and it's going deeply in that. And when they forget all about the history of the wheel, they're still going to learn about what learning means and what counts as learning. And so the idea of inquiry, we really try with a sense of sincerity and meaning, and the idea that knowledge is something that is a human need. We seek meaning.
Yeah.
We want to inquire about something, and the deep intention in Kairos is that we really try and retain and nurture that feeling of curiosity and meaning making right through our journey, so that by the time the older child is actually seeking to compare their ability to someone else, they ask to test for it. They want the test, so they want to measure their knowledge because it's an innate desire for a 12-year-old to know how they are compared to someone else. 6-year-old has no interest in that number. But the 12-year-old does want to know how they're doing, but they haven't lost that sense of sincerity and sincere curiosity. I hope that's
that does. That gives me a lot of context into how you teach. So what you teach, that the focus is on teaching the skills and teaching the capacity to learn, the capacity to inquire, the capacity to ask the questions and to be curious as an underpinning then for the key lessons and the subjects and the whatever form the curriculum takes. But I'm thinking about myself, Mark. I've seen so many different teachers, whether they're friends, colleagues, go through the journey of I understand where the world is going. I understand where the school system is broken. But if I'm about to sign my child up for a school, there is a very good chance that I'm going to choose traditional schooling, because if I look at what is being rewarded in the world, if I look at the chances my child has at success in the conventional world in 2025, this is what they need. I'm so sorry. I totally get it. I totally understand non-traditional methods. But it just doesn't make sense to the general parent right now, still at this day and age. And what would you say are some of the key differentiators? If someone is looking at the comparisons, what would you say are the true comparison points between traditional schooling for a child that's actually going into a world that we can't even see today, because it's going to be vastly different from what we have, to a child that is choosing to go to Kairos, for example?
So there's a lot to say there. I think we could portray the spectrum of schooling systems. On the very let's say this side is the very conventional and rigid schooling, and this side is the completely opposite end of the spectrum of following the child's inclination completely and trusting the child will want to learn maths if they choose maths. We very carefully place ourselves in the middle here. We're not a school that leans to going with the child's inclination.
Okay.
We do want the child's inclination, and we get to know the children so well. We're a very small school. We're 70 children. We know every teacher knows every child. In fact, everyone knows everyone. Every child knows every child, and every child knows every teacher. But because we know them so well, we know what they're interested in, and we have these conversations to know what they're interested in. And there is still a balancing act that we're quite careful about. We could easily be called the Kairos Chronos school, because we are aware that we are idealistic in our schooling, but we're not idealistic to the point of sacrificing the practical common sense future of our children going into high school. All our children go into mainstream high schools, and all of them excel in mainstream high schools. I mean, occasionally they need some special support, but large majority, 90%, go off and excel in grade 8 in every mainstream high school, from private and government and alternative, but mainly they go into private mainstream high schools. And they're ambitious, and they do well, and they retain a sense of competence and meaning without, but they've got that confidence of ability for the mainstream grade 8. So there has been a careful balancing act between the idealistic side, meaning the Kairos way, that we would love to have confidence that we have the children until matric, but we don't. So we know that they still need to pass exams in grade 8, so we gradually introduce test writing in its own right. To grade 4 is a mini test, grade 5 is a bigger test, grade 6 and 7 are more traditional exams. And we do those exams only because we know that the children need exam writing as a life skill.
Yeah.
They don't need exams as an educational skill, but it is a life skill that they need. They need to know how to manage time, pressure. They need to select more important questions to others. There are certain skills in exam writing and studying and time pressure that is important.
Yeah.
But it's not important in grade 1. And so the idea that you give a test to a grade 1 child is, for us, is completely anti-educational. It sends such a a complex number of problems. And there's an amazing large amount of literature to support this. In fact, mainstream literature generally support this. Even the mainstream schools support it.
Yeah.
But the community is established in these schools. And even if you pop up a new conventional school, the system expects a school to be a certain way. Especially South African public tends to be conservative. But globally, there's also an expectation that this is what a school should look like, because we've grown up with that expectation.
Two things here, Mark, that I want to chat about. The first one is some of the research. And I mean, I've heard a few things, like sitting at the early ages in actual chairs is apparently catastrophic for
Sitting
the
is
young.
the new smoking, they say.
And you've got these grade 1s and you've got these children in ECD that are sitting in chairs as compared to what they could potentially be doing that is better for their environment. So I want to talk to maybe just a few key things, research insights that you know about that are showing how what you're introducing and what so many other alternative methods of schooling are introducing. But I also want to talk about something that you said, and I want to challenge you here. You spoke about the 70 children that you have at the school and how there's these beautiful intimate relationships. That to me says it's not scalable, because if it sounds like that beautiful intimacy of knowing all of the children is a very big part of how education is rolled out, or the success of the school, that's telling me that if we were to roll it out across maybe the country, for example, we might have a bit of a problem. So maybe talk to me a little bit about that. What does actually scaling alternative education look like? And then maybe some of the literature.
Should we start with the second one? Start with the scaling and then go to the literature. We are 70 children because our property is zoned for 80 children. It's a practical solution for us. There is a deep value in an intimate school.
Okay.
And an author like Malcolm Gladwell talks about a community of 150 people is a ceiling. It's if you go above this number, you lose an intimacy. And at that, he quotes some research that 150 is a time when everyone starts not knowing everyone else. You lose you create a degree of anonymity in the community. And so 150 is a great number in a school community, because everyone still will know everyone. And the intimacy of a small school, and in our case we very small, we called it micro school. The ability that everyone knows everyone is very valuable. But it doesn't have to be so small, it could easily be a bit bigger. Nevertheless, if it was bigger, it would be easy to create micro schools within a larger campus.
Okay.
The idea that it has to be a rigid system comes out of this conventional mindset. There's so much flexibility in doing education in an open, creative way. There's so many different possible combinations. And yet, there's a background here that in the old, so a little bit of a history, that in about 1920, not more than 10% of any country's population had its adolescent population in school. Almost the entire world population was in the workforce from high school, from our current 12, 13 years old age. So this idea that everyone should be in school until adulthood is a new idea. And therefore, what's happened in society is that multiple functions of society have been absorbed into the institution of a school. And so there's one of the books that really inspired me. I was teaching in India, and I accidentally found a school. I volunteered in a school because I didn't want to be a tourist. I found something to do. And in my principal's shelf, there was a book called School is Dead. And it's incredible. It's out of print, but you can get a PDF. I think we've uploaded it on our website. It's influenced me enormously. I finished the book and I said to the empty room, this is going to change my life. And it influenced me since 1996 to think about one day starting something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ironic that I started a school based on a book that's called School is Dead.
Yeah.
But with amazing eloquence, criticize the institution of a school. And one of the points it makes is that the functions of socializing children, providing childcare, creating social values in society, I suppose that's socialization, is another one. Can't remember the third, but then there's education as the fourth.
Yeah.
Those are all provided by a school system right now. And that's one of the criticisms I have against the families who are opting for unschooling or homeschooling. They're looking at education as the service, but they're not looking at the community that the child is finding themselves in their society of the school. There's a community there that's really important. And sometimes that community teaches the wrong sort of things. Like bullying can be an education in a school. It can teach that bullying is valuable. Or, passive thinking.
Yeah.
And lack of inquiry are all aspects of a curriculum that can be taught in a school and can be powerfully learned. In the past, I once taught some first years in education campus coming out from top private schools in South Africa. And I asked them they were writing essays. And the idea that they were supposed to think for themselves was completely a new idea.
Yeah.
Coming right through the South African school system in a high fee kind of school, and they haven't learned to think for themselves. They were expecting to be told the answer. That's a real deep problem. So I'm getting lost in the question. So the sense, just to help me connect here.
So this particular question was talking about the scalability of it. So you were already mentioning that
I was going a bit into
there's the potential of the mini communities within a greater campus.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there could be so many different solutions.
Yeah.
And that's why if someone wants to create a Kairos school and call it whatever they wanted, they can. It'd be amazing to help influence the idea that this is not a rigid system. It doesn't have to follow the exact traditions of school as it's known to a traditional school.
Sure.
It can be so different. There are many different ideas and options. And then, so where I got lost is that the
literature,
the idea that most teenagers were not in school, and most schools, because there wasn't this idea of schools everywhere. Schools were a one building house, and you were in somewhere, and the idea of a massive school institution was very unusual. There was Eton in England. And these old established, you can almost imagine themselves like universities. They were institutions that were old, and probably based on the time where there was some expert in the hundreds of years ago, there was some apprentice joined a community, a master that attracted some apprentices, and that evolved and gradually into some school system. Yeah. But the idea that this becomes a system in the world, that came from America. America had its amazing industrial success, and it turned into the idea that they deeply needed a childcare system so that the parents could be in the workforce. Yeah. And the metaphor, it was at a time where factories were amazingly successful and the kind of the hero example of why America is great. And so when they saw the need for a schooling system, not one house schoolhouse, but a system of a school with a curriculum that is spread through the country of America, the factory was the best metaphor they thought about. And it was explicitly documented and marketed in the founding documents of this vision of a school system for that country, to say we need to manufacture amazingly economically productive units for our economy, being children.
Sure.
And they imagined children were being produced, and so this curriculum and syllabus and corridors of classes and even the school bell are all from that factory. There used to be a factory bell that told workers when they were allowed to work and when they were free. That is the school bell directly. And there's so many factory metaphors of curriculum and corridors and grades and teachers and children and then schools and other schools. All of that is coming out of a factory. And we obviously are very critical of that, and generally the world is critical of that. It's just they unconsciously supporting that through the conventional school system, without realizing that that's still a factory model. Many school systems can try resist that, but unless it's consciously, explicitly saying we are resisting it, the system tends to connect and serve that metaphor.
Yeah, and this is the other thing as well, and I want to just jump over to the literature to close off, is it's the system. And this is the beautiful thing about schools like yourselves, Mark, is that what you can do is you can exist fairly independently. And I love that you have created that beautiful ramp for your students or for your learners to go into a ramp where they go from a beautifully alternative, very inspirational, inquiry-led form of teaching into a formal form of schooling, if they wish to do so after they go to Kairos. So I enjoy that perception of it, but also the capacity. And more especially what I really liked is you linked it to a skill. You said that we can bring testing in for the children who want, or we do bring it in those learners can, but because of what it teaches you to write an assessment. And that for me was mind-blowing, because it could have very easily been, we have the test to accommodate or to make sure that those students can still move into mainstream. But it was because we understand and we can bring forth those skills. So I think that I really enjoyed. But I want to now close off with talking about what are some of the gaps that you have found are in mainstream schools, and maybe you can speak into some of the research and literature that you have based a lot of your design, a lot of your curriculum, and how you teach and learn at Kairos.
So we are a school that is influenced by a large amount of literature. I'm a little bit of a frustrated academic. I'm not in a university, but I love literature.
Yeah.
And so we've got a framework that is very carefully grounded in theory. And these theories are not usually found in one school. Usually you get a particular kind of school that is based on Rudolf Steiner or Montessori or some voice. That's one. For me, that's a problem, because then I've taught in a Waldorf system and I love Waldorf, but knowing how I was teaching in Waldorf, I was completely isolated from the other theorists in education. So we are very careful to try and be open to a wide variety of theorists, and Steiner is a significant influence. Okay. But a very important one is, and all our theorists are generally neglected in the conventional system. Okay. Marshall Rosenberg is a very powerful voice. It's someone I met in person, and I attended a workshop in nonviolent communication. And this is a modality for adults mainly for war zones. Okay. But he introduced the idea that communication can be covertly violent, meaning unkind. Yeah. and although he's no longer alive, tools that were relevant to helping people resolve incredibly difficult conflicts. The work has also been applied to schools and families and workplaces and elsewhere. It's an extremely valuable modality. And I think we're the only school that does this explicitly in Southern Africa. There are a few schools in Europe and North America who do this.
Yeah? How does that work? Tell me a little bit more about that. I'd love to hear more.
If I were to tell it how it works, the risk is it becomes a method, and it's not a method, it's more of an approach. Nevertheless, there is the idea that we can speak in a way that's covertly violent, and there's many different ways that do that. If I say, I had to come to this podcast today, I can't go to my maths lesson, I am telling myself and my listener that I'm trapped and enslaved in my life because I have no choice to come to Zanele to speak to you. Yeah. But I did have a choice. I could have said no, and I could have suffered the consequences of not coming here, and I would have been embarrassed, and there would have been consequences. But I did make a free choice. The same thing applies to when we talk to others. We often deny our free choice and our freedom, our free choice, but also we deny our experience in the moment of what is our actual feeling. And the children will often say, he's bullying me, but that's not, I'm feeling bullied or something, I'm feeling disrespected. Those aren't feelings, those are ideas of how, of what I'm thinking about what I'm feeling. I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling alone, I'm feeling sad. And those are feelings, because I'm needing fairness and justice and respect. And the need and the feeling are often confused. There's examples here, but these are examples to try and give you a feeling of what Rosenberg and the community of NBC people talk about. And it's very relevant that it's not just school, so people listening from workplaces and families, it's still quite powerfully relevant to there too.
Yeah.
There's other literature. There's a wonderful literature around against tests. A book like Punished by Rewards, which looks at how tests, even when a child is getting the A for a test, they're still being punished by the system. But definitely when they fail the test, they're getting punished. The whole system of tests sends a wrong message. And the test is very much, for me, the epitome of the problem of the factory-based schooling.
Okay.
That school test is so integral to the system that although we still do tests at a certain point because we're preparing them for that system, but the test is extremely problematic. And yet it's something that's in our society that we need to use with great care, and definitely not the weekly test, which sort of poisons the conversation in the class. Yeah.
How would you say the test is problematic? In what key ways would you say the test is probably something that needs to be relooked by the education community?
So there's a book, I'm in the mode of mentioning books now, a book called Teaching as a Subversive Activity. And it looks, there's the idea looking at a previous theorist called Marc Loon, who said the medium is the message. The medium, being the test, is teaching something that's deeper than the content of the test. And this author takes, Neil Postman takes an example of a test, or different examples of different test questions. Sure. Here's 8 test questions that you're likely to get in a test for primary school. And here is what it's actually teaching. And he lists 8, he's got 8 questions, and he has other things. And I've mentioned them earlier. One right answer, teachers only right answer. Children aren't supposed to be thinking what the right answer is. Feelings aren't relevant, art's not relevant. There's so much being taught by asking that question and pushing that test as the integral thing in the system. That test is, the child knows that they're looking for the mark, and the parent is asking the child for the mark. So the general expectation of the community, teacher and parent, and teaching the children that they must get the good mark,
Yeah.
rather than get knowledge and get learning. And they seem to be doing the same thing, but it's very different.
Yeah.
And they've done studies that the child gets the test, and they immediately look at the number. They don't look at anything they wrote or what the teacher writes. All the comments ignored. The number is important. Next, second most important is to look at your friend's mark, and then the children ignore the rest of the thing. In fact, the study comes from a university class. So this is right through the system, that even university undergrad students are looking at their mark, their classmates' mark, and ignoring the reason why they're getting the mark. Meaning it's a game. You're trying to play a computer game, and you're trying to get a good score. And it really is that game. They actually play the game, and they game the system. My nephew recently got his other class in Mpumalanga got a test, but the other class got the same test as him, and everyone knows this. So they game the system. He goes to his classmates saying, "What is the question? What's the answer?" He quickly prepares for that particular. So they game the system, and he's able to get a mark that's different to the other class because of the game of this thing, rather than trying to find the knowledge.
Yeah.
This is a matric student.
And we used to make a joke in school that they used to ask us questions like, in your opinion, from your perspective, and you would answer with your opinion, you would answer from your perspective, but you'd still get the question wrong, which was always so fascinating. But maybe they were trying to gauge whether you could make a link between the theme and the topic and then your personal experience or your personal opinion.
So that as long as it doesn't have the overriding pressure of a mark that gets the mark is held over you by the system. And I mean, the matric result is looming over everyone's heads. The grade 2 child has already been taught. Matric is being mentioned to it's a 7-year-old. So because of matric is a mark that's looming, the whole system is guiding towards that matric result.
Yeah.
And this matric is represented in so many different ways, and it's found, it repeats itself in university and in corporate life and everywhere. Sure. But the matric is such a symbol of the issue that we're dealing with. And then, I mean, even my children going into high school, I'm still going to prepare them for this matric, because matric is a result that you can't evade easily. I mean, you can almost not escape that pressure of that matric result, because it's very substantially impacting your life. 10 years later, they're going to look at your matric results. I mean, still today, someone might look at my matric result. There's this weird thing that the matric event is going to be so influential, and that influences the rest of the whole system, and therefore grade 2s are being taught. And even some schools saying, I'm teaching that so that you can be ready for matric. I mean, even the actual technical syntax of the test is similar, because directed. I need to prepare you. But that's ridiculous. To prepare a 7-year-old as a miniature 18-year-old, that's absolutely nonsensical.
Sure. And this is one of the things we were actually talking about and I'd love to encourage the unlearners either listening or watching this to go back to the episode with Bronwyn Williams, if it has come out before this one, and have a listen to that, because one of the key discussions there was the qualification versus the skill and the relationship between the two, and how education almost needs to be restructured, rethought, unlearned around how do we add value? What does value in the marketplace truly look like? Because then we start to understand that the qualifications we're holding in such high esteem maybe are not so much the things that open the doors, that have the conversations, that allow us to walk into the rooms we want to walk into, make the impact in the world. Because at the end of the day, very much like you're saying, that gets held over you. And then you get there, you've got your beautiful qualification, you're sitting there, and you can't necessarily access the life that you wanted, and you're not necessarily making the impact and adding the value to the marketplace that you could have added maybe 5 years before that if you had structured your education differently and gone to Kairos.
Yes, and gone to Kairos. It reminds me of another very, very valuable research paper, which you can easily find online. It's worth mentioning. It's worth mentioning that really we really don't know what the future is. This AI and the world of internet in general, and now AI, is threatening the education system profoundly.
Yeah.
And these qualifications we have no idea what these qualifications would mean. In fact, the idea that you can qualify someone is questionable, because you have to have the human being in the room and have to write the test in the room. In the world of computers, that's almost impossible, because you're going to be typing that answer, which means it's probably going to be using ChatGPT to help your whatever the future ChatGPT is, which is going to be completely new compared to what we know of ChatGPT. Yeah. There's a lot of fear going on in the world right now in terms of qualifications. We don't know the future. And in light of that, there's an amazing paper by the World Economic Forum. And they've done a very interesting study with all their political context. They've got an amazing paper called Skills of the 21st Century. And they do look at some basic skills that it's usually taught in school: literacy, numeracy, like basic reading and writing, being able to use logical thinking, and often that is through numeracy and mathematics, and cultural literacy and foundational skills. That is only a third of the requirement. There's also a list of character qualities that you've got, and a sense of grit, resilience, confidence, leadership elements, emotional intelligence, multicultural awareness, which is so much more significant than it ever used to be. For the actual jobs that the schools are preparing for an assumed set of careers. We don't know what those careers are now.
Yeah.
And these skills that they've looked at is what, at least they said, this is already an old paper. This is a paper about 10 years old. We don't know what the future is, but the emotional intelligence and character qualities of ourselves are more important than the literacy and numeracy. Literacy and numeracy, we certainly don't want to lose. I mean, that's threatening democracy and society. But you also don't want to lose the emotional intelligence, which is it's amazingly valuable paper, that particular skills of the 21st century.
Yeah, reminds me of that Alvin Toffler quote, and I don't know if you've heard it. The illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who can't read and write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because it is the skills that underpin, right? Yeah. And whether you are, and I think to close us off, and I'd love to ask you what the one key skill is that you think parents, teachers, the education community at large needs to be thinking about. But as you think about what that is, I think that this is it's really just a challenge for us to start thinking about that, is thinking about what the key valuable skills are and how wherever it is we are finding ourselves. And when we speak education community, we're not just speaking our children, we're not just speaking students at university, we're speaking all of us. You're a professional in a corporate office somewhere, you're at home working from home as a freelancer. We're all getting educated all of the time on a consistent basis, like you said so beautifully at the beginning. So really quickly, what's one key skill as the education community evolves at a crazy pace, like you said, that each and every person can focus on building now?
I want to be a little bit Kairos here. I call myself the head monster, not the headmaster, and I can answer in that in a little mischievous way. Instead of limiting it, I love your name, the unlearning. What is it called?
The unlearners. Yeah.
If the society and the parents who are sending children to schools, if they can unlearn the idea that schools have to be what they think it should be, if the skill of opening their mind to unlearning the idea that a school is what they think a school is, I think that would be a huge gift to society. That just there's an open canvas here, and it's really we're being forced into this open canvas because of the world of the fourth industrial revolution. We don't know what's there. Profound. But we can't avoid being human, and being human around the emotional and social curriculum, and the new kind of literacies that we need, the multi-literacies they call it. it's not one skill, but the openness. I think perhaps maybe that's a skill. Maybe there's openness in mindset. It would be an amazing gift to society.
Profound. So the title of this episode as we close off Unlearners was, is schooling the enemy of learning? And I think maybe from what I've gotten from what you have said so beautifully and eloquently, and learning just about the school, is that learning is so much more than school. And what you have introduced, and I guess so many other institutions, very much like you've mentioned already, Mark, have introduced or are starting to introduce, is that very idea that learning is more than just what we've known it to be. It's about the acquisition of skills, the practicing, the growing, the evolution of the individual, and not the building and not the curriculum, and not so much some of the tangible tick boxes that we've taught ourselves that it is.
Yeah. So learning is a human activity that is, we take great care to show that the teachers are also learners. We don't call the children learners, because that seems to imply that teachers aren't learners, or parents. Everyone are learners. That's a human activity. But also the idea that school is not only education. School is, if we were following the message of Everett Reimer, school is dead, the whole society would evolve and transform itself, and there would be a different element of education and all the other services, functions that schools provide. Nevertheless, the idea that the community that children engage in, whatever you call it, and currently we call it school, is much more than the CAPS curriculum or the national, what is written down in any document anywhere in the world. It's much broader. And it's coming together as humans.
Yeah, I love it. Can I give you a high five? I never do that, but
really?
This has just been so good for me.
Oh, good. Thank you, Susanna.
I think if I ever go back to being a full-time teacher,
you were a teacher.
Yes, I was. So I'm going to sort of apply with you and hopefully and cross my fingers. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. This has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you for your time.
It's been really enjoyable chat. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Unlearners, thank you very much for taking time to be part of this conversation as part of the Unlearners podcast. So much that we've unpacked today, but I think about your situation, your context, where you are, what role you are playing within building the future of education, and what the next steps are specifically where you are, because it can all get very, very overwhelming, but also extremely exciting, right? And I think that's the good news. Thank you so much for your time today.
Can I add something?
Yes, go ahead.
Just if you feel, I'm happy to invite anyone, strangers from anywhere in the world, to contact me on my website. Sure. It would be happy to engage in conversation. New opportunities can come with new connections. Kairosschool.co.za.
Absolutely. And we will link to that in the description, so that if you have an interest, please definitely connect with Mark and his team and just explore a little bit more about what to do. Really tap into your curiosity and engage, or inquire instead of engage. Thank you so much, Unlearners. We'll see you on the next episode of the Unlearners podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you, Zanele.
The Unlearners. Learn, change, learn, change. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow.